Thank you so much. Hello, everyone.
I don't know if you are still doing
Oh, this is so good. Thank you so much for that. It's so wonderful. This is the last session of the day, and I'm so honored to be here with an incredible panel of people, and so glad that you all are all here to be with us. If you are in the back and you would like to move forward, you're welcome to do that. We're so happy you're here, so thank you for being here. The title of our session is Creating, Sustaining, and Measuring Local Digital Equity Ecosystems. My name is Colin Reinsmith. I am the founder and director of the Digital Equity Research Center, which is located at the Metropolitan New York Library Council. Our center uses community-based and participatory research methods as a way to advance digital equity as a social, economic, and racial justice issue. I'm very pleased to be joined today by our esteemed panel, including Christina Munoz, who is a research analyst with the Intercultural Development Research Association and has been a member of the Digital Inclusion Alliance of San Antonio. I am also honored and pleased to welcome Dr. Fallon Wilson, who is the co-founder of Black Tech Futures Research Institute and the Vice President of Policy for the Multicultural Media and Telecommunication Internet Council, through which she has launched a national campaign that I hope all of you have heard of, Black Churches for Broadband. Yes. Also very excited to introduce Knowledge Build Hudson, who is Digital Equity Advisor with the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. Yes. And Knowledge Build serves the Southwest and Northern Plains regions and also has extensive background on his own with digital equity work in Pittsburgh. And lastly but not least, we are joined by Leslie Scott. Leslie is the Digital Inclusion Program Manager for KC Digital Drive, where she has worked to support the Affordable Connectivity Program, Workforce Development, Youth Digital Skills Development Programs, and many other digital equity programs. And I'm very pleased to welcome all of our panelists today. All right, so let's get to it. So just to get started, I'm very pleased to be able to lead this session on digital equity ecosystems. Our center at the Digital Equity Research Center has defined digital equity ecosystems as the interactions, social interactions and community interactions, right, in our communities between individuals, organizations, communities in their larger environments that are really essential for working together to advance more equitable access to technology, but also to advancing social, economic, and racial justice. We see digital equity as a social justice goal. We also see ecosystem building as key to sustainability, as Angela Seifer mentioned this morning in her speech, which was so exciting. And we hope by the end of the session today that you will have a better understanding of some of the following things. What are some of the elements within a local digital equity ecosystem that might be important to consider as you're doing this work? What are some community strategies to support your local digital equity ecosystem, including coalition building? And lastly, community challenges and strategies that center equity and social justice in local digital equity initiatives. We're going to hear what that looks like in communities across the country. All right, so lastly, I just want to say before I open it up for our wonderful panelists to introduce themselves, thank you so much to PhillyCam for live streaming this. I got my start in community media and in this field as a digital equity practitioner at a community media center in Cambridge, Massachusetts, it was Cambridge Community Television, and I ran a public computing center, and that's where I got my start. I was a practitioner doing this work before I became a researcher. And so community media is part of our local digital equity ecosystems, and it's really awesome to see PhillyCam here, so thank you so much.
Good job.
All right, and thank you. And lastly, we have a collaborative note-taking document that's linked to in what is it? Sked? Okay, thank you. I'm getting old. I can't pronounce stuff. So anyway, we have a collaborative note-taking doc, and I hope that's helpful. We've put a number of useful links, including to the folks here on the panel and the amazing work that they're doing, as well as some reports and some other information around digital equity ecosystems, so you can really walk away today with a really solid understanding of how this framework can help you in your work. All right, so let's get to it. So I'd like to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, and in their introductions, to please share a story or experience that has helped you to develop your idea of what a people-centered approach to ecosystem building looks like. And we're going to start. I'd like to ask Christina to begin.
Sure. Can everyone hear me okay? Actually, I'm a little close to this mic. Okay. I've been hearing some discourse instead, making sure that everyone can hear me. So hi, everyone. I'm Christina Munoz, as Colin so kindly introduced me. I'm a research analyst at IDRA. We're an education equity nonprofit that's based in San Antonio, Texas. And we've been around for more than 50 years. Our mission is to ensure that every child has access to an equitable education and has access to go to college if that's their choice, regardless of their background. I share that with you as I started at IDRA as a research intern in the summer of 2020, so right in the earliest parts of the COVID pandemic. And so I have worn many hats in my organization, but initially I became really interested in understanding the implications of the digital divide as I was helping students during my internship conduct survey research, some youth participatory action research that was really trying to understand what implications the COVID pandemic had on students' engagement to school and their learning. And so when I became involved in that project and helping students kind of understand the foundations of research, I became really interested in understanding more and learning more about digital divide. And I connected with a dear friend and mentor, Munire Santiago, who is now a co-chair of our Digital Inclusion Alliance of San Antonio. But at the time I met her, she really helped me to understand that this is a space that exists for me, this digital equity space. And from there, I've just become really enveloped in the work that's happening locally through my job at IDRA. But I guess to answer your question, Colin, or at least the first one, is about 2 weeks ago, this is the most salient experience I can provide, but about 2 weeks ago, I helped to facilitate a research training call for another student group that are based in South Texas in an unincorporated rural area called the Colonias. And if you're unfamiliar with who the Colonias are, essentially they are rural South Texas. They're areas where they have been disinvested for some time, and they're not able to access municipal services like water and sewage and what have you. So we have, IDRA has been connected with a community-based organization called Arise for, again, almost as long as our inception. And so we collaborate with them closely on many projects, but particularly this one is a new project called the Digital Ambassadors. It's very reminiscent of Digital Navigators insofar as we're helping to train these young people to how to serve their community by understanding what their community needs, right? And so part of that is to evaluate what those needs are. And so as a researcher in my organization, I lend my expertise to young people. It's my passion in the area of digital equity. That's exactly what it looks like, is meeting students where they're at in terms of their skill set, their expertise, but particularly where they live, right, in terms of the colonias. Again, their connection to internet is really through the centers that Arise provides for them. And so that's what it looks like, is in the case of South Texas, right, or at least the colonias, it's considering what tech is available at these centers and to meet them where they are literally, if that means going to travel with our privileges and our resources to go meet these families and these students there in the colonias. That's what it means. So I'll pause there.
That's great. Thank you so much, Christina. Dr. Fallon-Wilson.
Good afternoon. Oh, come on. It is the last session of the day, and we need all the energy up here. So good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you much. But give yourselves a round of applause. I am very blessed. I wear two hats. Nationally, I'm the Vice President of Policy at the Multicultural Media Telecom Internet Council, which is a very long name, and I often hate saying it so much, and so we call it MMTC. And they've been around for almost 36 years advocating for equity and for inclusion and also for liberation for cultural communities and Black communities when it comes to broadcasting, innovation, technology, and internet access. And so there I get to do great work. I help lead the work, Black Churches for Digital Equity, Colin.
Ooh, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. But I appreciate you nonetheless. Where we work with African American churches who are, in my opinion, overlooked but deeply trusted community anchor institutions who can really help guide the building of strong Black tech ecosystems for a future AI world that is driven by digital equity. Catch the last part, driven by digital equity. I am also the founder of Black Tech Futures Research Institute, where we develop an index to help cities understand how to build thriving Black tech ecosystems so that Black people can live in an AI world. Now the question is, how did I come to this work? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna go with it. I'm sorry, I'm joking. I looked at the questions, Colin. I'm just trying to paraphrase here.
It's whatever you want it to be, Fallon, actually.
Okay, so how did I not come to this work, but my research practice is what we're getting at. I would have to say it was serendipitous, intentional opportunities. My PhD is actually in gender studies. I thought I was going to be a champion for girls and trans girls of color to create learning environments. However, one day, a good mentor of mine said, I know you're tired of writing your dissertation in the cold winters of Chicago. Why don't you come down south in Nashville, Tennessee, and teach at our HBCU? I was like, I was broke, so I needed some money, and so I went. Sometimes, you know, it is not a calling, but it is some funding that you need. Not always your calling that gets you to where you're going. So I went, and because I was young, whatever that means, the HBCU president and the academic dean says, oh, Fallon, you're young. Why don't you teach our technology class? I was like, what does gender studies have to do with technology? I mean, I can answer that now, but back then, what was it? What did it mean? And I said, sure, because I needed a job, because I needed funding. And at that time, it was at the height of the Arab Spring, where communities were using technology and mobile devices in particular to organize against dictators. It was amazing to see how technology not only was great for innovation, but for social justice. Say social justice.
Social justice.
Y'all can say it a little louder than that.
Social justice.
And because the school was a historic HBCU, and it was a site where Congressman John Lewis and other sit-in leaders organized against, Jim Crow and racism in the South, the president then asked me when I finished my dissertation, Fallon, you're young. Why not come on and work with us? Help us understand how a historic HBCU can lead in a science and technology world without having a science and technology curriculum. I said, now that is a good question. I probably should be wrapping this up, but I'm getting to a point of my story on how my practice informed my research. And so I literally spent the next couple of years not only investigating how HBCUs could be cornerstones to building an ecosystem for innovation, but then I don't know this, as a Black person in this country, when you do one beautiful thing in a city, you tend to get asked to do a lot of beautiful things without pay. Without pay, yeah, you clapped up, yes, thank you, those who understood that. And so I ended up chairing our CIO, our Smart City reports, and then that led me into all types of conversations in K through 12th and STEAM. that led into conversations about capital and access for Black entrepreneurs in technology. And before I knew it, I was in every part of a tech ecosystem and realized fundamentally that Black people did not have access in any of these spaces. And so when I talk about my research process, our index literally looks at every eco subsystem within a municipality and can tell you the challenges and the opportunities on how you build thriving, digitally equitable, but future AI ecosystems so that Black people can live. But it was through serendipitous opportunities and how older Black people be like, you are young, you know technology. And so when we talk about like pathways into technology, we should also think about how even those who are not tech specific or tech literate, they see something in you, and then all of a sudden you are the leading technologist in your field in this work. So that's how my research practice came about.
Nice.
Y'all can clap for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilson. And you know, the list of indicators in the index, I recommend that everyone run, not walk, to go look at, because they're amazing, and there's a ton of them. So there's no question that there isn't a way to measure all the things that Dr. Wilson and her colleagues have put together. So it's really wonderful. Next, I want to turn to Knowledge Build.
Peace and good evening, or good afternoon. My name is Knowledge Build Hudson. I'm from Pittsburgh. Well, I live in Pittsburgh. I'm from Michigan. So I think it's about ecosystems, one story. So a little bit about myself. So, okay, so I work for NTIA. I'm the Digital Equity Advisor.
And I get to clap for you.
You can clap for me. It's all good. I can do a little dance for you. So I'm a digital equity advisor for two different regions, the Northeast region as well as the Southwest region. I'm also the interagency liaison. So, and NTIA is the National Telecommunication Information Administration, right? So we're the folks who got a lot of the funds to ensure that we can bridge the digital divide across the country, territories, and tribes, and with all the help of you all. And so I've been there for about 2.5 years. And the title is the title, but the work is just continuously changing, right? So it's like from planning grant to capacity grant to eventually competitive grants, ensuring that people are in compliance. I'm working with folks who are in the state, so it's a lot of different things with the intention of ensuring that the people at the end of the conversation receive the things that they need in order to become self-sufficient, right? So for my background, I worked at the Housing Authority City of Pittsburgh for about 5 years, and there I was the government relations liaison and special projects coordinator. And as a special projects coordinator, Connect Home USA was one of my special projects. And so I was a part of the 2017 cohort, and that was like my second entry into digital equity, because before that I was like a volunteer on a Mesh Networks volunteer board. So we were trying to ensure that people in low-income communities, as well as businesses in low-income community, could receive free internet services to allow them to be connected. So that's where the origin of it came from. But at the Housing Authority, as it relates to ecosystems, so if you know anything about Connect Home, there's no money. It's just great ideas. It's like they have resources that you have none, right? You have people. And so what we did, and we being the city of Pittsburgh, as well as our authority and another authority, the Allegheny County Housing Authority, we developed a small coalition of folks, it was just us, with the intention of trying to ensure that residents were able to receive access to the internet for free. But we had to start small. So we worked with a local refurbisher, which is Computer Reach. I think Dave Sevick spoke earlier. And we had a little bit of funds which came from the Housing Authority. And I think Dave had received some money from a foundation, right? So there's a foundation, there's a refurbisher. So he came with North Star, which is a resource, and so what we did is we brought the people. So we wanted to start in one community with seniors in a high rise. So we did classes. They had to complete 4 classes, and it was incentivized. Upon completion of the 4 classes, they would receive a device, right? So they learned how to turn on the device, plug it up, how to connect to the internet, all the way to how to use social media. So they probably all had, email addresses as well as, Facebook pages, right? So with the intention of ensuring the connectiveness that you could be used from the internet, because again, it's a tool. Right. And so we had about 35 residents who participated and received these devices. And as a follow-up, I wanted to ensure that, make sure that these devices aren't just flower pots, right?
Right.
And some of them it were. They were like, I ain't plugged that device in since that class, but thank you though, right? And that's just real, right? Or I forgot how to plug it in. Could you show me how to like plug it back in? So the follow-up education was important. But there was some of the residents, like in the high rise, that use that one device to impact everyone on the whole floor. So one folks in particular, the person who had the device, she started a business. The person down the hall, they finished her GED. Another person down the hall, they started classes, right? But off of one device. And so that to me spurred me to think about how do we measure the impact of access devices as well as digital skills, right? And so that was like the story and the ecosystem that really pushed me into this where I am today. Even though NTIA found me because of the work I was doing, I was open, like almost what Dr. Fallon was saying, serendipitous. I was at Net Inclusion in Portland, and the opportunity came about, right? So, so sometimes it's like where you are and the fact that you're doing the work. Now, when I started NTIA, which was August 2022, green as ever, right? You know what I mean? Green as the green screen. They're like, we're going to do this work. We didn't know what we was going to do. We just knew we was going to do something. My first trip that I was on was to the Colonias, right? So in I've never been to Texas. I mean, I've been to the airport. So I was in South Texas with this young lady next to me, right? With IDRA, with the Arise and the community in South Texas, the Colonias, right? And that was like my first passion as far as how do we ensure that these people who, because they speak Spanish, are seen as not citizens, but most of them are citizens. So let's just start there. They are not connected, not just to the internet, but like Christina was saying, sometimes they don't even have running water. Sometimes they were giving us stories like the one family said that there was, during COVID, they had the only place they had high-speed internet was in the bathroom, and there was 3 children that had to take classes as well as the adult that was in college in the bathroom. So things, and they weren't considered rural because they're rural adjacent. So the challenge of even receiving funding because they're not considered a rural community. So that experience helped me in my work today because I always remember those communities and to ensure that I keep the promise that I made to them that we'll ensure that we show up for them. So those are my stories. Peace.
Good.
Thank you so much, Knowledge Build. And Leslie, welcome. You need this.
Colin and I are sharing. So I was fortunate enough to work at a very small nonprofit organization called Connecting for Good, founded by Michael Imata and Rick Dean, and became their part-time volunteer coordinator. And in that role, I trained volunteers and was able to also do some digital skills classes. And during that time, it was really evident that even though we thought technology skills were just ubiquitous, there were still so many people who had been left out of the equation. Right. And so that experience firsthand then led me to apply for the very first cohort of the Digital Inclusion Fellowship. Any other former or current fellows in the, yeah? And if you were at a panel that Anita Lee was on, she was in my cohort, and shout out to Anita and all the rest of my fellows. And we were actually at the Google campus in Mountain View the day that Connect Home was announced. We were having a little happy hour. We thought we were so cool, y'all, because we had to have a temporary badge to get in the building, and then they let us get back into this micro kitchen where you could have all the dried seaweed or milk alternatives you could ever want. And so I spent a year at a workforce development organization, and I think the story that sticks with me the most was I was walking through in this open space. We had this computer lab, this bank of computers, and there was a woman who was clearly in distress, and she was panicking, and she didn't know what to do, and she was just so beside herself. And so I stopped and I said, can I help you? And she says, I just need to apply for this job, and my ride is waiting on me, and I just need to apply for this job. And I looked at the screen, and she had pressed the button to send this job to a friend. So instead of the apply button, she pushed, send to a friend, and she didn't know where she was, and she didn't know how she got there, and she was afraid her ride was going to leave her. And I don't know, has anybody else been public transit dependent in a city that does not prioritize public transit funding?
Right.
Yeah, it's tough, right? So if you don't have your own transportation and you're relying on either the bus or, a friend, family member to take you where you need to go. And this was a housekeeping job at a hotel. So, it wasn't anything that was going to require her to have a lot of digital skills, and she was just really struggling. And I just really remember that panic and that anxiety and how just not knowing which button to push, derailed her completely. And so fast forward a few years, and we have the pandemic.
Right.
And one of our, ironically, so I live, hands up if you knew there are 2 Kansas cities. Come on. Yeah, okay, so I live in Kansas City, Kansas.
Is it Kansas City, Kansas, or Kansas City, Missouri? Okay, gotcha.
Now, that's the small part of our region, right? So Wyandotte County, where I live, is the poorest county in our region, right next to the wealthiest. And so when you see an NFL game, that's Kansas City, Missouri. So just so you know. But you want to come eat over in KCK, so where all the good tacos are. So Johnson County, our neighbor, stood up an internet subsidy program, the funding. So it was passed September 24th, and if anybody else had to spend CARES Act money, it had to be spent by December 30th.
Right.
We are a regional civic nonprofit organization with a mission to make Kansas City a digital leader, and so we are a B2B kind of organization. So we work at the intersection of digital equity and tech innovation, because it's important to have both of those, because the innovation challenges of today are the inclusion challenges of tomorrow, right? And so we stood up our very, very first direct service program, helping people pay for their internet service prior to the emergency benefit, broadband benefit program. And so we've been doing that now for 3+ years. And boy, did I hear a lot of stories from a woman who came home to find that her husband had passed away unexpectedly, young. The woman who was taking care of her granddaughter, she was going to end up adopting, the woman who was embarrassed because she let her internet get disconnected because she had to pay her title loan payment, or they were going to come and take her car, and then she couldn't go to work. And sorry, I get a little verklempt sometimes thinking about these stories, because it's clear that the affordability side of digital equity is really hard for many, many people. And so, we have done a lot of different programs, convenings. I want to give a shout out any Tech Goes Home folks if you watch the live stream. Thank you to Tech Goes Home, Deb Sosha and her brilliance. She's amazing. One of my heroes stood up Tech Goes Home, and then I don't think it was year before last, I was watching the live stream of the lightning rounds, and I was like, why don't we do Tech Goes Home in Kansas City? So we did that to provide capacity building for those direct service organizations in our community because they are the ones who know more about the people they serve. And so if anybody is not familiar with Tech Goes Home, we provided a $2,000 micro grant, so a $1,000 stipend to the trainer, $1,000 in unrestricted funding to the org, and then they were able to have their minimum of 15 hours of digital skills training, and then they could earn a computer for a $50 copay. And then we were also later on, when we did it in collaboration with the Missouri Office of Broadband Development, we added in the ACP training as well for the trainers. So, you know, it very much is about providing that capacity building, amplifying what's already happening in the community, because those direct service orgs, you know, they know what people need way better than we do. And you learn that by being on the ground. We can have all the meetings and convenings we want, but it's that day-to-day interaction that really informs the work.
Right.
Thank you so much, Leslie.
Thank you so much, Leslie, for those real people and for everyone for sharing the sort of people-centered stories, right, in this work and why ecosystems are so important. And it was actually in 2015 when I had an opportunity to visit you all in Kansas City, and that's really the first time that I learned about the power of an ecosystem and the ecology of support that supports so many people in this work, and that's why we're talking about it today. But we want to get to some concrete strategies and examples that you all can maybe additional things that you can take away with you from today. So I'd like to ask in our last question before we open it up to everybody, if you could please share an example of a strategy, tool, or method that you have used to center and/or measure equity and authenticity. Right? Authenticity. And I'm grateful to this panel for helping us to center that. It's so important. How do we center authenticity in your ecosystem building work? And any challenges you were able to overcome in this particular example. So I'd like to start with Dr. Wilson.
This is, well, thank you. Colin, I appreciate you because I swore someone else was going to go before me. But anyways, this is such exciting conversation. For me, I think what I have done with our index, one of the strategies about being authentic and making sure that the lived experiences of Black people come through the research work that we do on tech ecosystems is that we operationalize joy. Say joy. Joy. I know. We don't talk a lot about joy as quantitative or qualitative researchers, but I think we should, especially when there's so much deficit data about African American communities. And so, as shared earlier, part of our model is looking at the entire ecosystem of a city. So we look at subsystems. We look at K through 12. We look at workforce development, we look at post-secondary, we look at tech entrepreneurship variables, we look at government policies both locally and nationally, and then we give a city a score. What I realized about that is that many of the scores that we gave for some of the southern cities that we worked with, they were very low. So we graded on a scale of A being you have an amazing city that supports the growing of a thriving Black tech ecosystem, or an F, you need to do better. And what I was realizing with our index work, Colin, is that all the cities were failing, and technically they are failing, but it's very hard to get mayors and chambers of commerce and other amazing partners who have resources to think that they can change something if it's so heavy. And so we built joy into our model. Ask me, how did I do that? Oh, I love. Y'all give me some energy. The way that we did that is that we believe that in every city in this country, there's a critical Black digital infrastructure organizations that are building toward tech futures for Black people in each of the subsystems in our index. So that means that if we're looking at K through 12 and we're looking at computer science scores, there's an African American created coding camp in Nashville, Tennessee that's working with their local schools to provide coding camps. That is what we call a critical Black digital infrastructure organization. The more organizations you have working within the subsystems, the more joy and the less disparity you have in your city. Why is this significant? It's significant because we often don't see Black organizations leading in these spaces, not because they're not doing the work. It is simply because they're not a part of our research agenda. We don't know how to find them, and we assume that if we cannot see them in front of us, then they do not exist. But they do exist. And they exist with amazing institutions like our historically Black colleges and universities that are graduating the highest number of STEM Black professionals in this country. And so part of our work is to number one, as practice and strategy, we have to be able to say that I was going to say that Black people exist. I think a lot of my working strategy is to prove that we exist, that we're living human beings with destinies and futures. But I have to be able to say it in a way that people understand it, and so I use research to do that because that legitimizes us, right? And I hate that I have to use tools to legitimize the presence of Black people. So that's why I had a pause moment. Sometimes I have these moments. And so for us, the strategy is to always look, and if you're doing this work, look for Black and brown organizations and community anchor institutions created by those communities as places for research, for partnership, and also for joy. And so some of our cities are able to do better on their scoring because they had HBCUs. They had faith-based Christian churches that served Black communities and also had public computing. Let me also say this. Black churches have been doing this work for a very long time. I know you're like, how, Fallon? Well, in the early 90s, when public computing was a whole thing, they had public computing in their fellowship halls to help people find jobs. They were not necessarily teaching computer science, but they were definitely having a space where they understood that for you to get a job, you had to have a device and the internet. And so for us, our strategy is to identify joy. We operationalize it by the community anchor institutions that have been created by Black people, and we see and outline the work that they do, and we amplify it because we do exist. Okay.
Thank you so much, Fallon. Knowledge build.
So strategies, right? So first off, I want to say you want to meet people where they are, right? Like know your audience, right? And that's so important because a lot of times we'll come, like you got the money, so you come with the privilege, and you come with the cape because you're trying to save the people, versus recognizing that there's people that are there. There's a there when you showed up. Things existed before you came. And you know,
Can I clap that over?
for sure, it's real. And that your money and resource is not the end all, be all, savior to all things, right? So understanding that you are part of the solution, but you're not the solution, and that's very important to show up authentic to me. The other one is like finding trusted partners, right? Like who's the voice of the people that you can work with in order to help the people help themselves, right? Because remember, like, this is not just about the internet or devices or access to affordable, things. This is a pathway to self-sufficiency. This is a pathway to change. This is about economic development. This is a pathway to jobs. This is a pathway to decrease recidivism. These are tools, right? So when you approach it like that, you come with a value add, right? So again, you're locking arms with the people that you're working with and recognizing that they are part of the solution as well. You know, and allow them to be the voice. But you have to incentivize it too, right?
Say that part. They didn't catch it.
I'll rewind it, DJ, bring that back again. You have to incentivize it, right? You know, you have to ensure that they're not just leaving with your words.
Right.
You know, time is a valuable resource that we can't get back. So you want them to show up to the meeting, you want them to click the link, you want them to fill out a survey, you want them to, you know, get patted down. All these hoops that you got to jump through in order to receive access to the device or access to, you know, and what do they get in return, right? And after the money dries up, then what?
Say that again.
Were you just a trader? You know what I'm saying? Were you just, you know, did your organization pivot its mission because digital equity is no longer the key words that you need to put into the, you know, into the application to receive the funds? Now it's about mentoring, so no longer about devices, so you just pivot, so you're no longer there? Or are you really trying to develop relationships that's going to be everlasting, right? So you have to show up as your true self and full self and also be vulnerable. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say, I don't know. You tell me, right? You know, so to me, these are the strategies. These are the strategies to be authentic and to be a true partner in this work, right? The challenges are that, you know, there was people that came before you that left. You know what I mean? like you know, you're just a suit or a fancy word, a person with a promise. So, you know, in order to like really develop those relationships, you have to be, like I said, you have to be honest, authentic, and take your time. You know, so to me, these are some of the strategies that I would like to share with you. And some of you guys already know that. Some of you guys are already doing the work. You know, but even encouraging other people to do that. You know, because until we work together, we're going to continue to go against each other, you know, and we're going to put ourselves on these pedestals because of our egos and think that I have the money, you have the need, and that's the way we work. It's a transactional relationship. Versus together we could change community, together we could change America, right? We could change, you know, so, once again, the end user oftentimes knows the answer to this problem.
Right.
Just because they do not have access does not mean they do not have solutions. So,
Well said.
you know, those are the things I just want to share.
Well said.
Peace.
Thank you so much, Knowledge Building. We can't, I think, hear them enough. These are amazing strategies and reminders for all of us, I think, in this work. Next, let's go to Leslie. Here you are. We have about 8 minutes left.
Okay, I'll try and hurry. So I wanted to read an email that I got from a community partner. So they had borrowed the mobile lab that we purchased for Casey Goes Tech so that organizations could have their training on site. And she said this technology played an important role in the success of the Dollars for Scholars financial aid clinic for high school students and parents. Although some participants were able to bring in their technology, many of the participants needed a device. This event centered around training students and their parents on digital access on FAFSA scholarships and ACT resources. So if you've ever helped somebody apply for college, or you did it yourself and you remember, your higher ACT scores get you scholarships, right? So she says, this collaboration is an excellent example of how necessary it is for our communities to have quality technology and internet access for family education and planning. So, you know, again, back to that capacity building, amplifying role that we have. You know, I think that's definitely one strategy. When you see somebody doing great work in the community, how can you lift that up? How can you bring your own resources to bear, the relationships you have with funders, you know, the technical assistance you can provide to small organizations new to grant writing, all those kinds of things. The other thing that I did as a digital inclusion program manager was to review our state's digital equity plans. And one of the things that I noticed, and frankly, I have a small sustainability-focused nonprofit, so I kind of come from this, from my own personal experience, is, when you have reimbursable grants, or you require a match, or you don't accept in-kind, as a match, it has to be cash. Small grassroots nonprofit organizations don't have a big reserve sitting around to be able to spend that money up front on programming and then submit a reimbursement. So, those were the kinds of things that I encouraged our OBDs to think about as they were putting together their grant programs. I don't know how feasible that's going to end up being for them, but as I have been engaged with the small organizations who could really collectively move the needle because they have the relationships in the community. They're going to, as one of our community partners says, Miss Jones down the block, they know those people. We wonder why folks don't come to our classes, or why, we're doing all we can. We put Facebook ads out, we put flyers everywhere.
Right.
It's the digital ambassadors in the community. Those are the folks who have the connections and can be the ones to bring people to the resources. And so those are who we're trying to support.
That's right.
Good job.
Yes. Thank you so much, Leslie. And Christina.
Sure. So, I can underscore what everyone on this panel has said with respect to building relationships and authentically doing so. I think the only other element that I'll add to is centering the expertise of community members in the work we're doing. For example, the youth participatory action research that I'm really jazzed about, I think it's important to invite youth to learn about digital equity as soon as possible in terms of what an ecosystem is, what is digital equity, and bringing in young people to help us as adults in this space to learn how to pivot to meet the needs of students and their families and their adjacent communities. And so I think that's the other only element that I'll add is that that helps us as an ecosystem, as an alliance, to understand what effective solutions we should invest in, or not we necessarily, but we can help to get investment for. And then I think, what I'll add to about San Antonio specifically is the nature of our coalition is really unique in the sense that we are not an official nonprofit or 501c3. We are still a volunteer-based coalition, and so that's been really interesting in the sense of allowing us the flexibility and the adaptability to move around a really heightened or an active space in the plight of COVID. But that's afforded us the opportunity as well to ensure that as a coalition we're helping to find strategic alignment across our ecosystem partners, because that's really important when we're trying to figure out how do we funnel money into the areas or the vulnerable populations that most need it now, but we can think a little bit long term about how to effectively invest in the needs of our community when we have conversations, honest conversations about what the health of the ecosystem looks like, who are the partners showing up in this space, and how can we actually leverage resources and assets that exist already. Because like everyone on this panel has suggested, is the work has been going on for as long as it has been, and the assets exist, and a lot of them are people assets, human assets. And so trying to figure out how to leverage those shared resources is really important. And then lastly, the one thing I'll also add about our alliance is the philosophical approach we take to the work we do. It's equity as a practice, not as an achievable goal, not an end goal we're trying to meet. And I think having that as an approach is extremely it's extremely important and critical to not only being adaptable, but ensuring that the goals that we're trying to meet, and they're ongoing, right? These goals shift and evolve. They're also ensuring that we're making progress. But I will say that's been a challenge, right, for our alliance, particularly as because we all have other jobs and we're donating our time and efforts to the alliance, is trying to evaluate what that progress has looked like internally. But that's one thing that we have found, for example, an asset mapping inventory has helped us with, is trying to assess like who's who in the ecosystem space, and kind of helping them or having them inform us that what progress has looked like for them, so we can kind of in a more comprehensive way track that for the ecosystem. Has been an interesting exercise in and of itself, but it's evolving, and I think it's, again, just really important to continue going back to the roots of it, is building authentic relationships, because that is the #1 element, I believe, and having a healthy ecosystem is trust, and cultivating that through real engagement with people.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christina. So, and thank you to all of our panelists for their wonderful tools and strategies and recommendations. So we have about 10 minutes left, which is just, this is so fast. It went so fast. But we've been asked, if you do have a question, if you could approach one of the 2 microphones with your question, so we can make sure that the folks on the live stream can also hear them and everybody in the room can hear. But we do have time. So just to recap, as people are slowly walking up to the microphone, if anybody has a question, that clearly what ecosystem sounds like a fancy word, but we're really talking about what does a community-wide approach to this work look like, right? And who needs to be at the table, and why, and how do we do it in a really meaningful, authentic way, right? This has also, just to get a little nerdy with my research hat for a second, this has implications also for how we measure success, because for the past 25 years, we've measured success by individual connections to people.
Right.
So we've said, we've kind of given up when we've said, well, somebody has access to the internet at home, an individual, so they can shut their door and be, by themselves in their home, and our job is done, right? We know now that this work is so much bigger, and when we care about the health of our communities, it requires us to change our thinking about how we measure success. An ecosystems approach that embraces the community and authenticity and people and the assets that exist give us a new challenge today, and I think there's an opportunity for all of us to do that work, and we can determine through Fallon's amazing work with the index and the indicators that are there. That's a roadmap for NTIA, for the nation, actually, if we truly want to move forward in this space. So what questions do you all have in your work, either sharing a story or questions you have for our panelists? Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My name is Teal Duncan. I am from a company called Celerity. I am inspired, I am empowered of the panel that sits there. I work adjacently with one of you on the panel, and at this current moment, when we're talking about digital equity plans, we are moving out of planning, we are moving into implementation.
Right.
And in my line, and in my background, I care about results. Because in the end, no matter what the plan said, and we submitted it to NTIA, we have to have receipts. And what happens with coalition building and relationships and relationship building and some of the good stuff, the things that make the money, more money come, get lost in the seed because of lack of funding for reporting, lack of understanding of how do we keep that measurement of reporting. And hearing Fallon's index, knowing also I learned about the Muni index that was going on out of Philly in this area. Yeah. I learned about that on a webinar that happened in Philadelphia, and I was online in Maine, like some of these live people a few months ago. I was just wondering, are there other indexes? What else should we even be asking maybe our universities, our research institutes to start building to help us report the good work that grassroots people are doing every single day?
I will say, unfortunately, and I may be the only, yeah, I'm gonna say it, I don't, it's the afternoon, y'all, and I'm fading. I would say that I will look to community researchers before I look to university partners often, primarily because university partners, they sometimes, number one, don't have relationships with community anchor institutions, our trusted community partners to be able to identify or develop research questions that get at the nuance of the lived experiences of the communities that we know really need the help. And there are community-based participatory research institutes. I would say if you were going to look at partnering with universities to help develop questions, look to your tribal colleges, look to your Hispanic serving institutions, look to your historically black colleges and universities, because number one, they are, you want me to speak louder? Oh, I'm sorry. Listen, I don't know if it's like
The light.
you know, I'll be trying to project. God, it's the light, y'all. The light is
light's
blinding.
serious.
So I'm looking like this. But I would say look to those institutions because number one, they, at least a part of our model, they are community anchor institutions that drive innovation, and also they have connections to other community anchor institutions, whether they're faith-based. In particular, historically black colleges, many of them were founded by faith-based institutions that populate those neighborhoods and those communities. And so working with researchers there, I would say, would be more in my lived experiences with working with all types of universities to be the most beneficial to help me think through robust questions and also how to get connections to those communities.
Teal, get with me after I have an idea.
Anyone else on the panel?
Yeah, please. I was just going to share, you know, and then you may not work for, say, broadband office, but there's also data that other federal agencies have, like the VA, HUD, USDA, Department of Education. They have data, and they work with the covered populations, right, if I use those framework, in underserved communities, that is public information, right? And so that's on a state level, sometimes on a local level, you know, and so it's also like developing those relationships there to identify so that you're not like duplicating the work. They may have done the work. They know how many people are underserved, or should I say low income? Let's just use that as an example,
Okay,
right?
that's what I'm about to say.
Yeah, right, my bad. Like, you know, so, you know, but so there's information there that you can use, whether it be as a baseline or just to like start so that you don't have to like redo the work that's already been done. So I'll just share that.
I'll add too, just because I'm at a really interesting intersection between like education, digital equity space as well. And as a research liaison for my alliance, I found it actually really helpful to connect with education agencies because, you know, I think now, especially during the pandemic, they've provided a lot more information and data that's publicly available on, you know, some states are better than others. I can speak for Texas, you know, but I think, again, they're collecting pretty good data in terms of internet access at home. Census data is also available, but I think the education space is a good way to understand how families are being influenced as well or impacted. So that's just the other idea that I would add there.
Thank you so much. And then we have time for one last question. We have a few minutes left.
Good afternoon. Good
Hello.
Afternoon.
My name is Sanka. I work with Tech Goes Home. I'm sorry we missed our shout out earlier, but thank you to all of you for such a great panel. So we really appreciate everything that you all have said about centering community voices in this process, not only in getting feedback about how a program has gone, but in the planning and forming those authentic relationships going back to the community to iterate. So my question is, for us, that's something that we're able to do in communities that we have a history with. We do that by relying on our trusted community partners, you know, our knowledge that we've heard from the folks that we've been serving directly. But do you all have advice for organizations that are moving into maybe a new geography, a new community they may not know well, and any advice for how to identify who those trusted partners might be and which voices are going to be really key to include in this process?
Okay, I would say that you would start by going to the places where people congregate and just watch and listen. Like, you know, like meet people. Like, it's like you can't be afraid to meet people, and I think recognizing you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, so do more listening than speaking is a good way. That's one way to like learn. There's a lot of places where people congregate. So I think just identifying those things, you can just observe and see who's doing what, and listen to who's doing the certain things that you're trying to like engage with.
So I'm going to get brownie points with our facilitator. Colin did what I thought was just an amazing, groundbreaking study that really helped me think about what makes a program successful, and it was really about trust, right? So libraries, he identified as one of the most trusted institutions in a community. I was looking this way because I just thought Dr. Wilson was going to say, go to the churches. So
I really was going there, but I was waiting.
No, so that's what I was like. So I'm going to let her say that because she knows this inside and out. And so I think that feeling of comfort, of trust is just, so where are those places that people go and have those feelings?
And I'll just add to young people, like seriously, students are not just brilliant, they have amazing innovative ideas, but they're hungry to do something. And I think plugging them in where they can just do really amazing things. At IDRA, we have what's called a youth advisory board, and long story short, it's a collective of high school students who help us to design and co-create our agenda going into legislative session, which for us will be next year, based on what they're seeing in their schools, right? And I think schools are another, schools are another place. I would, add that that's an institution, at least. I'll pause. I'm laughing because, in Texas, like, there's always, like, an attack on education and elsewhere. But what I'm saying is that in schools, you have a community of young people, of teachers, of educators who recognize what issues, with respect to digital equity here, what issues are impacting them and their homes and in their communities and their neighborhoods, and they're change agents. They really are.
Dr. Wilson, do you want to take us home?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we're building relationships with cultural communities who have been historically marginalized. I think first you have to do your own self-assessment on how you enter space, right? Understand how privilege interacts in that space for you. And I am a firm believer, faith-based spaces, for all of the ideological, sometimes crazy, dogmatic things, holding that constant, is a easier space to enter, to begin thinking about how to build relationships with people, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam, whether it's Buddhism, whether it's the various types of religious traditions. We have Hinduism. People are more likely to be open to talk with you as you commune around their faith practices. But check your privilege, whatever that means for anyone up in here. Don't be going up and they'll be like, I know Lord Krishna. You don't know Lord Krishna. Okay, you called it. Okay, thank you. I'm just simply saying, I think we have to think of counter-public spaces because that's where people are. That's where they feel comfortable and safe. And that's how you begin to build trust. I shouldn't say this.
Say it.
All libraries are not funded equally. Let me just say that. And I have seen some of the data with some of the libraries that are in predominantly Black communities. And so it is not a space that I would build community at. It is not a space that is well funded or respected, and my people are not there. So I just say that, find counter-public spaces. And you could do research. There's a lot of readings and literature that has been created about cultural community counter-public spaces. So you're like, I don't know where to go. Go to the library. do some readings, and then begin mapping that ecosystem in your city. And beginning with faith communities is always a good place for me.
I would just say my community doesn't have a library.
Say again, I'm sorry.
My community does not have a library.
Yeah.
So we are unfortunately out of time, but please join me in thanking our amazing panelists for sharing their work and their stories and experiences with us. And thank you all. We are at the end of day 2, I guess, and have a wonderful evening and see you tomorrow. All right, thank you so much.
It was wonderful.
It was an honor.
I learned so much from you all, yeah.
Thank you, Mama.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Christina.
Thanks for sharing. Thanks, Sophia. It was an honor being